With us here on RT. Our top story, the UN Security Council says an investigation is needed into allegations of a deadly chemical attack in Syria. The opposition there accusing Assad forces of gassing hundreds of people on Wednesday and clashes near Damascus. That's been strongly denied by the government. After the claims emerged, Western nations quick to weigh in, offering support for the rebels' claims and calling for action against the Assad regime. While Russia says it could be a deliberate provocation to derail peace talks, RT's Marina Portnoy reports from New York.
The United Nations Security Council has said that there is a strong concern among council members and a general sense that there must be clarity of what actually took place, what went down in Syria, whether or not there are any facts that can support the allegations that have been made by Syrian rebels that Syrian President Bashar al-Assad has used chemical weapons, killing more than 1,000 people. Now, the Security Council has called for a thorough and prompt investigation. Deputy Secretary General Ellison said that the Secretariat is in touch with the Syrian government, and he hopes that all parties in Syria, including the opposition groups, will cooperate with the United Nations as the organization moves forward in figuring out the truth surrounding the allegations. In the meantime, it's also something that that's worth pointing out is that the U.S. and its European allies have previously already accused Damascus of using chemical weapons against the opposition. Now, that conclusion recently prompted the United States to begin providing military aid to the Syrian opposition. Britain and France have repeatedly called for Bashar al-Assad to step down. And while the latest round of allegations made by the Syrian rebels haven't been verified, the circumstance has prompted the U.S. to once again state its personal preference related to the Syrian crisis. Take a listen. There is
Work that can be done with our international partners to try to continue to pressure the Assad regime. We've seen evidence and indications that the Assad regime is feeling that pressure, but you're right that that has not resulted in the outcome that we would like to see, which is Assad being completely removed from power. That's not just the preference of the United States of America, that's the will of the Syrian people, and that's why it's important.
Now, it may be no coincidence that the Syrian opposition is making these allegations, latest allegations against the Syrian government, just a few days after a team of UN inspectors arrived in Damascus to examine previous suspected cases of chemical weapon use in the war-torn country. Now, the UN expert and the head of the current mission in Damascus, a Swedish scientist, Dr. Sellstrom, told a news agency, TT, that while he had only seen TV footage of the high numbers of casualties, he believes that the numbers of those that have been injured and or killed, those numbers being reported, he says, sound a bit suspicious. Meanwhile, officials from the Russian Foreign Ministry say that reports by, quote, biased regional media, unquote, about the alleged chemical weapon use near Damascus might be a provocation planned in advance. The Russian Foreign Ministry, citing its sources, said that a homemade rocket carrying unidentified chemical substances may have been launched from an area controlled by the opposition.
RT Middle East correspondent Paula Sleer has been following how these latest events unfolded in Syria.
Media reports are citing the Syrian Revolutionary Command Council, which says that government forces loyal to the Syrian President Bashar al-Assad were flying over the area after the bombardment using chemical agents. Now, this attack happened in the rebel-held area of eastern Damascus, in a place called Eastern Ghouta. The area has witnessed heavy fighting between opposition fighters and the army. What we are hearing is reports that the al-Nusra Front, which are fighters that are affiliated with al-Qaeda, are also operating there. Now, some reports do suggest that more than 1,000 people were killed in this latest attack, but other reports talk about dozens dying. Graphic images have flooded the internet, showing alleged victims choking, foaming at the mouth, and displaying other possible symptoms of chemical attacks in Syria. The origin of this footage, however, is unverified, and that point needs to be made that no one knows where it was filmed or who filmed it. The first to break this news was the Saudi Arabia network Al Arabiya. Now, Saudi Arabia has its own agenda inside Syria. It's anti the Syrian President Assad, and therefore any kind of reports of the use of chemical weaponry must take this into consideration.
Over the course of the civil war, Syria's oppositions repeatedly accused the regime of mass atrocities and chemical attacks, many such claims coinciding with major political events and diplomatic efforts. And in most cases, the number of victims proving to be exaggerated. Here are just a few examples. In July 2012, the UN discussed a possible intervention in Syria, rebels announcing a civilian massacre in Tremsa carried out by the government, which later proved to be false by a UN observer mission to the town. In August, just days before UN Security Council meeting, the Daraya massacre, again, Assad was blamed, but it was later found rebels may have been the likely perpetrators. In December, as Russia, the U.S. and UN met to discuss a peace plan, the West accused Assad of arming chemical weapons for imminent use, but the arsenal wasn't used. Later in December, as UN peace envoy Lakhdar Brahimi met with Assad in Damascus, rebels alleged another massacre after an airstrike on a bakery. But after the initial frenzy, it was later reported that all the people were opposition fighters killed in battle. In April this year, rebels reportedly provided the U.S. and Britain with proof that Assad had used chemical weapons. It was seized upon by those countries to funnel arms to the opposition, while a UN investigation found it was most likely rebels behind the chemical attack. UK-based political analyst Patrick Henningsen thinks that even if the attack did happen, it may be too early to point the finger at the Assad regime.
Of course, if we look at the history of this particular region, the Ghouta region where the attack is said to take place is very active with the al-Nusra front, and they've also been implicated in using makeshift chlorine bombs in Aleppo back in March. So there's a track record there. The evidence, unfortunately, does not stack up with these present claims of the Syrian government perpetrating these attacks. Who benefits from a chemical attack in Syria? Well, the opposition benefits. It's quite obvious. The Syrian government does not benefit. The opposition benefits because this will be the key to unlock the airstrikes and bombing campaign over Syria a la Libya. The opposition would like a Libyan-style coalition with NATO in order to force the regime out of power in Damascus. So they clearly benefit from any reports of a chemical attack in Syria.
We're watching